It is a strange feeling to see your favorite video game developer turn into something you do not recognize. I have been a huge fan of BioWare since I was in high school, since I first played Mass Effect when it came out in 2008. I was hooked, and it instantly changed me as a gamer. Up until then, I pretty much only played fighting games and the occasional action game like Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden. But that game made me basically change everything about what I looked for in a video game. I suddenly cared more for deeper narratives. I liked customization and choices. I loved everything about Mass Effect. And a year later, I was blown away by Dragon Age Origins, which was my favorite game of all time and is still in my top five. And if you had asked me about 10 years ago where I think BioWare would be, I probably wouldn't say in the gutter. But that's where BioWare is right now. And it's an interesting story of how they got there. My name's Cole. I'm going to be looking at my favorite video game company of all time, BioWare, how they rose to prominence, and when their fall from grace started. The title of this video is The Rise and Fall of BioWare, so we really need to look at the games that really put them on the map. Some of you may be thinking, oh, he's going to start with Mass Effect. No, because there were games that were more important, at least initially, to BioWare's success. I want to kind of go back a little bit further to when they were making D&D games, specifically Neverwinter Nights and Baldur's Gate. Neverwinter Nights, I'm not going to talk too much about it. It's an okay game. It's a solid game. But Baldur's Gate 1 is its superior in every way, shape, and form. That game is so good. Now, Baldur's Gate 1 was using Dungeons and Dragons Advanced Edition settings, so second edition. And it was a hard game. It was a dark game. It was really gritty and was for the hardcore TTRPG fans. So that turned a lot of people away from it, especially with stuff coming out like Final Fantasy all over the place. So BioWare made a name for themselves with the hardcore TTRPG like fan base, but Baldur's Gate 1 didn't really put them on the map with mainstream gaming. However, Baldur's Gate 2 kind of did. Baldur's Gate 2 was a little less hardcore than Baldur's Gate 1 when it came to its difficulty and just how intense it was. It had a little bit more of a lighthearted edge when it came to its characters and the snarky companions. It had romances, which, as far as I know, Baldur's Gate 1 didn't have any romances. Baldur's Gate 2 absolutely does. And the story was just so well written. It was a dark, gritty fantasy story, but it wasn't afraid to have some snarky characters with some heart to them. And it had some lighthearted elements to it that Baldur's Gate 1 was severely lacking. And also, the game was much easier than Baldur's Gate 1. So that drew in a lot more of the mainstream crowd and a lot more of the JRPG crowd. And that kind of put them on the map as like the Western RPG guys back then. Like, really, their only competitor at that point in time was Bethesda. But there is one other game that was far more important to BioWare's initial rise: Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Now, I'm currently playing through this game on this very YouTube channel. It's my first time playing through it. It's a blind Let's Play. I seem like I'm very early on if you look at the playlist, but I'm way farther than I am the playlist because I recorded in advance. I'm almost at the end of the game now, and let me tell you, if I had played this game before playing Mass Effect, this game would have done the exact same thing for me. It is that good of a game. It is a phenomenal RPG. I have very little issues with it, but this is not a review of the game, so we're going to move on. It really set the standard for BioWare and what we can expect going forward. Whereas Baldur's Gate 2 was a very popular game, but still more niche, KOTOR was a mainstream success, which was BioWare's first huge mainstream success. And it set the groundwork for everything we expect for BioWare now, all the way back then. Everything that came in Mass Effect and Dragon Age was started in KOTOR. And I know a lot of people like to say that KOTOR is just this like spiritual predecessor of Mass Effect, but it's got a lot of Dragon Age's bones in there. Or rather, I should say Dragon Age has KOTOR's bones. Combat, very similar to Dragon Age. Very. The way the characters are written honestly feels a little bit more Dragon Age-y than it does Mass Effect-y. But that could just be the fantasy elements. And of course, there's the light side, dark side system in KOTOR that became the Paragon Renegade system in Mass Effect, and there's some returning voice actors in the Mass Effect, but I think it's a little bit more of an even split than people give it credit for the inspirations going forward with BioWare games. Now, KOTOR was a huge success, and this actually gave BioWare the opportunity to stop making games in other IPs and start to make their own IPs. Some of you may be thinking that the first one was Mass Effect, but in fact, there was another game that came before Mass Effect called Jade Empire. It was a fantasy martial arts RPG, and it felt very KOTOR. The combat system was definitely a lot more intricate and, in my opinion, better, but it was the storytelling and everything like that felt very KOTOR, and it was a great game, but it did not do well. That's not what people were looking at BioWare to make, was a game like Jade Empire. Honestly, I think if Jade Empire came out today, people would be ecstatic over it. And if you haven't played it, go play Jade Empire. It's a much better game than people get credit for. But of course, we all know the games that actually made BioWare mainstream successes and household names among gamers: Mass Effect and Dragon Age. Everything that they did in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, they made better in those two IPs. Now, Dragon Age has always been the better selling of the two, but Mass Effect has been the more popular among like the gaming community, it seems like, which is strange to me. Because obviously, if you know anything about me, if you've been on the channel for very long at all, you know that Dragon Age used to be my favorite video game franchise of all time. Mass Effect is one of them, but it's not even in the top 5, if I'm being honest. That doesn't mean it's bad by any means. In fact, Mass Effect is one of the best sci-fi RPGs ever made, period. I think the only modern sci-fi-ish RPG that can give it a run for its money or is better than it is Cyberpunk. So what did Mass Effect do that was such a big deal? Like, what did Mass Effect and Dragon Age both do? And I think the biggest thing was making the player's choices matter, or at least feel like they mattered. I do think that Dragon Age did a better job of actually making the decisions matter in the game itself, in the first game itself. In Mass Effect 1, a lot of your decisions don't mean anything in the first game. And that's kind of one of the big differences between the two franchises. Mass Effect, you play as Commander Shepard all the way through the first 3 games. Dragon Age, you have a different protagonist every game. So it's really a pick your poison. Do you want a game where the decisions you make are not really going to affect the game you're currently playing, but will very much affect the next game directly for your character? Or do you want this game series where your decisions are going to greatly affect the game you're currently playing while only slightly affecting the games in the future of the series? Either way, they did a great job with it. Both Mass Effect 2 and Dragon Age 2 did a very good job with taking things that happened in the first game and expanding on them. Mass Effect 2 did a much better job than Dragon Age 2. Yes, it absolutely did. But Dragon Age 2 didn't do a bad job. But that's kind of what I was talking about a second ago. Dragon Age was a lot more focused on each individual game that you're currently playing. Things you did in the beginning of Dragon Age Origins mattered halfway through the game and at the end of the game. Same thing with Dragon Age 2. Things you did in the beginning of the game would matter at the end of the game. The decisions you made matter in the game itself you are currently playing. Mass Effect, not as much. Mass Effect 2 did do a better job of this than Mass Effect 1, like upgrading your ship and stuff, but that's not really decisions in the story as much as it is just like making your ship stronger. Like, it's a decision you as a player make. I will say Mass Effect 2 did a good job with incorporating the companions way more than the first game, because the companion loyalty missions were very well done in Mass Effect 2, and this actually set a new trend for BioWare games. Because previous to this, yes, we had companion loyalty missions to an extent in Mass Effect and Dragon Age and even KOTOR, but they were all kind of like hand wave off to the side, like, yeah, you can go do it if you want, it doesn't actually affect the story that much. In Dragon Age Origins, the only one that really affects the story in that game is Alistair's, and it's a 3-minute long quest. Mass Effect 2 started the companion loyalty mission like idea. Like, to the extent that it was. It was kind of there before, but it was much better executed in that game. And man, was it just so good. Mass Effect 2 is my favorite of the Mass Effect franchise, and everything about it I like better than Mass Effect 1. There are some things I like better in Mass Effect 3, namely the combat and the RPG elements, but Mass Effect 2 just did everything I wanted Mass Effect 2 to do. And that's why most people still agree Mass Effect 2 is one of the best ones. Like, I know everyone's got different opinions on that, but still. Dragon Age 2 was received a little less favorably, especially at release, but mostly because it was starting to get rushed out. And this is where we start to see the first chinks in the armor of BioWare. But I don't think it's BioWare's fault yet. At this point in our little timeline, this is the fault of Electronic Arts. Something I haven't brought up until now is that Electronic Arts, the publisher, purchased BioWare as a developer. So any BioWare games from now on would be published by Electronic Arts. And at first, we didn't really see any impact in this, because both Mass Effect 1 and Dragon Age Origins were phenomenal games, and BioWare capitalized on that with Mass Effect 2. However, Dragon Age Origins was such a financial success that EA started to force BioWare to rush the game out. What we now know as Dragon Age 2 was originally supposed to be a spin-off game. And then, whenever the EA executives came down to BioWare and said, hey, how are we looking on the next Dragon Age game? They were like, oh, look, we got this little spin-off, and then here's the full sequel, but this one won't be ready for a few years. Got the spin-off, and they were like, no, no, no. Take this game, change the title from Dragon Age Legacy to Dragon Age 2, and make it the direct sequel to Dragon Age Origins. And they did. And to BioWare's credit, with the amount of time that they had to make Dragon Age 2 and push it out, it's a damn good game. And it was impacted a lot by its DLCs. We'll get to that in a second, but upon its release, Dragon Age 2 wasn't received very well. But the people who actually sat down to play it and focused on the story was great. The characters were phenomenal. The BioWare formula was still there and it was working. The only things that were bad about it are things that most people don't play BioWare games for, like reused maps and waves and hordes of enemies that just spawn in, weird graphical things. These are things that most people who were playing BioWare games at the time didn't give two shits about. It was mostly people who were coming into Dragon Age from Mass Effect didn't like these things. Now, Mass Effect 2 and Dragon Age 2 both had DLC expansions. Mass Effect 2 had Lair of the Shadow Broker, Project Overlord, and Arrival. All very good DLCs, not going to spend too much time talking about them. They just furthered the world building, pushed the story a little bit more. Great games. Great DLCs to a good game. Wow, I fumbled that pretty bad, didn't I? Dragon Age 2, on the other hand, was kind of the opposite in one way. The DLCs ended up being kind of the best part of the game, which is a sad thing to say out loud, and this would be a continuous thing for Dragon Age from this point forward. Because BioWare actually had time to really sit and work on these, the Dragon Age 2 DLCs, Legacy and Mark of the Assassin, were so damn good. Legacy in particular is probably my favorite, well, second favorite, BioWare DLC expansion. It's so good. It introduces the villain for the next game, which is like, why was this not part of the main game? And you want to know what? Apparently, it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the actual end of Act 3. Oh, yay. You're going to hear me say that a few more times. Now, for the course of this video so far, when I'm talking about Dragon Age and Mass Effect, I've looked at each numbered entry, as a pair. I'm not going to do that with the next two games. I'm going to look at Mass Effect 3 and Dragon Age Inquisition as separate entities, and I will do the same for Andromeda and Veilguard. So first thing, we got to look at Mass Effect 3, which has an interesting story. It was a little bit more rushed than Mass Effect 2, but nowhere near to the extent of Dragon Age 2. EA was still giving BioWare time to cook with Mass Effect to an extent, but they did push up the deadline several times, to a point where Mass Effect 3 was 90% a phenomenal conclusion to the first two games. And then the last hour of gameplay happened. You finish the Earth mission at the end of the game. You run up to the beam that will send you up to the Citadel. And then you get hit by Harbinger out of nowhere. And if you don't have enough resources, your party is dead on the ground. And even if you did, you don't know what happens to them. Then we get some bullshit rushed ending where they don't explain anything and you pick a color for your ending. Can you guys tell I'm still very mad about the state of this game at release? However, this is also another example of EA rushing BioWare. This was not BioWare's fault. The end of Mass Effect 3 is still considered one of the biggest controversies in gaming from this time period. And with good reason. One of the most anticipated RPGs of all time, one of the most anticipated games in a long time, the finale to a trilogy of phenomenal games. Most of the game is phenomenal, and then the ending is garbage. Takes nothing you've done in the entire trilogy into account. Now, BioWare did remedy this. They did release the extended cut DLC for free, which was an additional add-on to the ending. It actually adds over an hour of content to the ending, over 2 hours, technically, if you really take your time and actually talk to the Star Child to its fullest. And it's actually a pretty good ending. The extended cut DLC ending is actually a pretty good send-off to Shepard and Mass Effect. We even get an epilogue after the end, and all of those plot holes that happened originally, they are dealt with, they are mentioned, they are talked about. However, even though I love the extended cut ending, I will still always love the memes from that time. Marauder Shields, you're a bro, you tried to save us from the ending. But Mass Effect 3 gets a bad rap because of that ending, and I personally think it's the second best Mass Effect game and one of the best BioWare games ever made. But, that being said, the ending was rushed. And this is another step, another chink in the armor in BioWare. We've had rushed Dragon Age 2. We've had DLCs that have more effort than the base game. And now we have a rushed game with a bad ending. Now, all of the issues were fixed because EA realized their mistakes at the time and let BioWare cook and fix the problems. So, hey, if you're back in 2012, 2013, and you're looking at the future of BioWare, Dragon Age Inquisition comes out next year, you're like, hey, you know what? Even if the next game isn't that good, EA lets BioWare fix the problems. So that'll be fine, right? Wrong. We need to talk about the next 3 games made by BioWare. Starting with Dragon Age Inquisition, which seemed like a return to form. Dragon Age Inquisition has a few issues, but most of the issues are nitpicks. Bloated open world, side quests that feel like fetch quests, but overall, the game's story and characters, and even gameplay, pretty good. Personally, I think it has the weakest gameplay in the Dragon Age series, but it was still fine. It was passable, and that's not what I was there for anyway. The characters were amazing, the story was fantastic. The villain is the worst villain in Dragon Age, but you know what? That's actually still saying something because Dragon Age does a really good job with their villains. It was a fantastic game. Like, no complaints, honestly. And then the DLCs came out and they just added on to how good it was. Everyone was like, oh, hell yeah, BioWare's fucking back. We had this renewed sense of hope. And the end of the Trespasser DLC sets up Solus as the villain for the 4th game. And we're going to Tevinter. And we're excited about a game where we fight the Dreadwolf. Everything looks great. It seems like the issues from Mass Effect 3 and Dragon Age 2 are finally behind us. And then we get 2 stinkers back to back. I will briefly touch on Anthem. But first, my friends, I need to go over Mass Effect Andromeda because there's a lot more to talk about with that game. I may not talk for a long time about it because it makes me upset to think about, but I am going to address it. This is the worst Mass Effect game in many ways. Now, I will first say, the combat in this game blows the previous 3 games out of the water. You'll find that's a trend for the bad BioWare games. It's got fun gunplay, you can switch your class on a whim, biotics, tech powers, anything you want, combat powers. Party members suck in combat, but you know what? That's not a big deal because you are a one person wrecking machine in this game. And some of the characters are actually pretty well written. Drac might be the best Krogan in Mass Effect history. Don't shoot me for saying that. Jaal is an interesting character from a new species that we find in the Andromeda system. PB is there. Vetra is Girl Garrus, but worse in every way. I'm not even going to talk about Cora and Liam because they both fucking suck. But there were some good things about Mass Effect Andromeda. There were. The story at times could be compelling. The ideas presented in Andromeda are compelling at first. Exploring a new galaxy, colonizing a new galaxy. It's interesting ideas and like aspects of like the future we talk about in real life, things that humans may have to do one day. However, none of it really hits home. Like I mentioned before, the characters are incredible downgrades from the trilogy. Now, I will say that a lot of the characters in Andromeda are far more fleshed out and better written than the Mass Effect 1 versions of the characters from the trilogy, and only some of them. But compared to the Mass Effect 2 and 3 versions, yeah, not even close. The gameplay is superior. The open worlds, I think, are an upgrade from Dragon Age Inquisition. I actually think they did the open worlds much better in Mass Effect Andromeda because it felt like there was more to do that wasn't just busy work. And even the busy work was more fun than Dragon Age Inquisition's. Not even going to lie. But that's about the only compliments I'm going to give this game. The villain is just the Reapers, but worse. Literally everything about the Ket is what if you got the Reapers from Temu, right? From Wish. Their entire thing is they take other species and they turn them into Ket. Hey, isn't that what the Reapers have been doing? The first 3 games wasn't that the entire plot of the original trilogy? Why are we recycling this plot again? It's a new galaxy. There should be new threats, different threats. Why? Also, why are there only 2 new species of alien, at least sapient alien, in the whole game? And then we find out one of them are just basically husks of the other, and probably other species throughout the universe. The Ket are boring villains. They are bad villains, which sucks because they had opportunity to be good, well-written villains. My god, the Archon is just Saren but worse. He answers to like the higher beings in their order and like their or like for the Ket, and he can't fuck up or things will go badly. He's a jobber. The main villain of the game. The first foray into Mass Effect since the trilogy is a fucking jobber. And this can be done well. It's been done well in other games. Not in this one. The entire premise of the game is interesting, but the planets you go to seem too safe, too easy, too simple. The companion quests are actually pretty well done. In fact, even the characters I dislike, like Liam and Cora, have very interesting companion quests. It's too bad the companions themselves are not good. And then we have to pay attention to the Angara. Now, the Angara as a species on their own, I do like in Mass Effect Andromeda. I think they are a good addition to the Mass Effect universe. My problem comes from the fact that they are the only true sapient race we encounter in an entire new galaxy. They try to say some bullshit about how the Ket have like wiped people out, or maybe have, they don't know for sure. They've been at war with the Ket for so long they can't remember. There's this scourge going through the stars that destroys things. I may be getting a few details off because it has been several years since I played Andromeda, but I know the gist of it, right? And remember how it made me feel at the time. And it is still to this day the only BioWare game that I have only played 2 times. It is not the worst BioWare game, but it is probably the most the second most disappointing. Because the bones of a good game are there. The bones of Mass Effect are there. The DNA is in there. It's just not good. And now we need to talk about the state at which the game was released. My gods. The animations, the graphics, the frame rate, the performance. It was so bad. The character creator, bleh, awful. Everything about that game at launch was just the definition of either mediocre or garbage. If you're watching this video and you're like, Andromeda wasn't that bad, I played it last year. Congratulations. You played it after they fixed it over and over. And even then, you've played the original Mass Effect trilogy. It's better, isn't it? The trilogy, I mean. Andromeda is way worse. I can't talk about Mass Effect Andromeda anymore except to say that I fully thought that Mass Effect Andromeda had killed Mass Effect forever. I was so concerned. Thankfully, apparently it hasn't been killed, but my hopes for the next Mass Effect game are pretty low. Pretty fucking low at this point. Now we need to talk about the worst BioWare game ever made, Anthem. Which is weird, because the gameplay is actually pretty fun, or at least it was. You can't even play the game anymore. The servers are down. It was an online only mech based, like you were in a mech suit, kind of, but like a humanoid sized mech suit. So basically, like mini Titanfall, kind of iron. It was kind of an Iron Man simulator in a weird way, and the gameplay was fun. However, I don't know why I didn't see at the time the red flag of a BioWare game that is an online only live service action game. That doesn't scream BioWare. I was excited because the trailers didn't really market it that way. Some of them did, but the ones that I initially saw marketed it as a story-driven action-adventure game from BioWare. And I thought to myself, hey, that could be pretty good. BioWare's great at stories. I know they usually do RPGs, but they could make a good action-adventure game. I unironically think they probably could make a good action-adventure game because they've gotten really good at action gameplay, honestly. But their storytelling has declined. We're going to get into that in a moment. Anthem has a dogshit story. I can't remember a single character name from Anthem. I played that game through the story twice. I lied. That's the only other game I've only played through twice. That's a BioWare game, and I don't remember jack shit. I remember the gameplay. I remember the environments. I remember some of the enemies you could fight because the gameplay was fun. But it is the worst BioWare game because no BioWare game should ever have that bad of a fucking story. I'm done talking about Anthem. So at this point in our little timeline, BioWare has made so many phenomenal games. And only 2 games you could really say are even bad. And even one of those games, Mass Effect Andromeda, you kind of can't even say it's bad. It's still a decent game. It's just a bad Mass Effect game. Let's just be me. It's been a few years since Mass Effect Andromeda comes out, and I'm replaying Dragon Age Inquisition, and I'm just kind of sitting there a little nervous. I'm like, Anthem and Andromeda were pretty bad. But you know what? Inquisition was only a few years before Andromeda, and the Dragon Age team is different from the Mass Effect team, right? So yeah, maybe the next Dragon Age game will be good. And this is where the fall of BioWare truly begins. Not even from a poor game release, in between games. First off, most of the people who made the original Mass Effect trilogy have left. They've started working on their own games. Casey Hudson is at a different company. David Gator, the lead writer of the first 3 Dragon Age games, is gone. Most of the writing team from Dragon Age Origins isn't there anymore. And all but like 3 of the writers from Dragon Age Inquisition are gone. They hire new team leads. Some promising ones. We get our first trailer for the 4th Dragon Age game. A title comes on screen. Dragon Age Dreadwolf. excitement fills me. Because even though I'm hesitant, I just finished a replaying Inquisition, and I had so much fun. And then in 2023, you get a trailer. A trailer for a game called Dragon Age the Veilguard. And the trailer is similar to a hero shooter trailer, showing the characters with goofy, silly, cartoony artwork and Varric narrating over it. And at first you think, oh, is this some like little side game in between Inquisition and Dreadwolf? And even at the end of the trailer, you're not sure. You're like, okay, I guess like it could be the fourth game, but like, oh no, the fourth game is called Dreadwolf. And then BioWare officially says that no, Dragon Age Dreadwolf has become Dragon Age the Veilguard. There's a lot of history in that transition. And in the months leading up to the game, there's a lot of hype, buzz, and hope. The only people really shit talking the game in the months to its release and who are like, oh, don't play this, it's going to be crap, were alt-right loser incels who were mad that there were top surgery scars and a non-binary character confirmed to be in the game. But if you're a BioWare veteran, shit like this is nothing new. In Dragon Age Inquisition, there was a trans man character that was part of the Bulls Chargers named Krem, and there's an NPC you can talk to called the Surgeon who actually does transition surgeries for people who are trans. So this is nothing new to you. So if you're an actual BioWare fan, you don't give a shit about any of that hate. You're just moving past it because it doesn't bother you. There's a couple of weird things, like at first the art style looks a little weird, but then it starts to grow on you. And I will say, even to this point, I think Dragon Age Veilguard's art style is real good. The character customization trailer comes out. Character models look really good. Like, when you actually see what you can do with the customization, they did release a few weird trailers where it's like they with a Kunari Rook who looked really weird, but then they released more trailers with more types of characters, and the character models look fucking great. If you're me, you're a little bummed because you can't make a character super jacked, but if you make a Kunari who's tall and has as much muscle as possible, you're kind of buff. But that's just a nitpicky thing from me specifically. The trailers come out. You get this trailer that shows the Siege of Weishaupt Fortress and the Grey Wardens. Shit's looking good. You get the first 10 minutes trailer, or like the first act trailer, where it shows the opening all the way to confronting Solus at his ritual. And it looks really good. And you're excited. And then, as the game is close to releasing, shit starts coming out about the game. I ignored all that. I was like, I don't want to read any of this till I beat the game. And I'm glad I didn't, because I feel like my first playthrough enjoyment would have been hindered if I knew all this. And I will admit, my first playthrough, I was blinded by wanting to love the game, wanting to prove the right-wing incels wrong. So, I think I fooled myself into thinking that it was a really good game. It's not a bad game. However, in this case, no one can deny that it is a horrible Dragon Age game. I am not going to spend too much time going over everything wrong with Dragon Age Veilguard, because if I did, the video would be an hour and a half long. If that's a video you want me to make, I'll make it. I am going to touch on some things, though. First, let's start with the good of the game. The game graphically is gorgeous, and its combat is so good. It is the best combat we've ever gotten in a BioWare game, ever. Sue me if you disagree. I don't give a shit. Dragon Age Veilguard's combat, so good. Remember when I said that the games with the best combat in the series were the worst in the franchise? Yeah, it shares that same problem with Mass Effect Andromeda, where the gameplay is really fucking good, but everything else about it is bad. Now, to Dragon Age Veilguard's credit, the animations are good. Graphically, it's gorgeous, and it fucking runs well. So they learned the lessons from Andromeda in that regard. However, I'm not done giving it its roses, actually, because it has some of the best moments in all of Dragon Age. Weishaupt Fortress, that is the best set piece in all of Dragon Age. The end of the game, the island, and then going to Minrathous, that's one of the best endings in a BioWare game. And the island feels very Vermeer, and Manrathis feels very Suicide Mission from Mass Effect 2. And there's a reason for that, which we'll come back to when we get into the negatives and like the story of how this game fell apart. And also the fight with the double blighted dragons, peak. However, those are outliers. Pretty much everything else about the game is either just fine or really bad. And the entire character roster of the new characters, there are three that I think are good to really well written. Balara, I think, is a very decently well written character. She is a little quirky and weird, and she has some cringy dialogue, but to be cringe is to be free, let's be real. She does have a really well done companion quest. It's actually my favorite in the game, and she's just a very emotional, heartfelt character, and I actually believed all of the emotions that she has going on. It made me tear up. Her companion quest made me tear up. It's a good game. It still makes me tear up, and I don't like the game that much anymore. Last time I played it, it still made me tear up. Balara, I don't have many notes except that she's just a little weird, but well written character. Certainly not the best. She kind of feels like Meryl, but a little worse. But I mean, that's fair. Dragon Age 2 has really good characters. Emmerich and Davrin, I think, are two of the best written characters we've gotten in a long time from BioWare. They are both really, really well written. Their dialogue is great. It's fantastic. It feels like it belongs in Dragon Age Inquisition or Dragon Age Origins. They feel like they were written for Dreadwolf, not for Veilguard. There's a difference. And then the rest of the characters are either just fine or outright bad. I think Harding is fine. Like, it feels like she was written to be another character like Volta or Dagna, and then they just threw Harding in at the last minute because, oh shit, people wanted to romance Harding. Here you go. Should have been Dagna or Volta. Now, she's just fine. I think there's a lot of problems with Tasha's character, and I want to clarify none of those are about Tosh being non binary. And I'm not going to talk about Tasha's non binary story angle at all, if I do a full review, even, like a full analysis, I guess, because that's not my place to talk about. I am a cisgendered man. I can have my issues with it. I can think it's well written. I can think it's poorly written, but I'm not really going to talk about it because that is for the non binary and the trans community to talk about. Now, I have talked to a few people in the non binary and trans community about it. And some of them have said they think it was really well done and that it was super emotional for them and that it was actually kind of healing for them. Others are like, wow, that was a piece of shit. So, seems to be a pendulum one way or the other. So, if you want to see an analysis on that topic about Tosh, go watch a video from someone in that community. And while I may be in the LGBTQ plus community as a bi man, that is still not my place to talk about that. But there are other things about Tasha's character that are so poorly written. Like the thing about choosing between being Rivani or being Kunari. Why the fuck is that my Rook's decision? And also, it doesn't matter at all. Earlier in this video, I talked about how Dragon Age did a really good job about making the decisions in that game affect that game. Like, decisions you made in Origins mattered in Origins. Decisions you make in Veilguard feel like they matter a little, but not very much. Even the biggest decision in the game, like choosing between Treviso and Manrathis, there's one clearly correct option, saving Manrathis, but it really doesn't matter all that much, either way. Oh, it affects Nev and Lucanus's character quest lines. Oh no! The two worst written characters in the game? Whatever will I do? Yeah, Nev and Lucanus suck. They're awful. They're so poorly written. It's almost funny. It's not. It's almost funny. Oh, it's so bad. Now, talking like this, you might think I hate Dragon Age Veilguard, and I don't, actually. I think it is, of the three bad, quote-unquote, BioWare games, I think it's the best game. It runs properly. It has somewhat of a good story. It has good story beats in the story. It has a few really well-written characters. But there are things that make it just unforgivable and the most disappointing of the three, even though it's the best one. And by the three, I mean Andromeda, Anthem, and Veilguard. So I can hate on Andromeda all I want, but one thing it did not do is it did not ruin the lore of the previous three games. Dragon Age the Veilguard, in a lot of ways, feels like a fuck you to true Dragon Age fans. Destroying the South, basically making everything that we did in the first three games not matter. Okay, cool. Thanks, Inquisitor. Why aren't you doing your job? Oh, wait, that's right, because you're not really my Inquisitor. Yes, we got to make our Inquisitor in the character creator and pick a few different options about them, but that's it. There are very few decisions from the previous three games ported into Dragon Age Veilguard. And their argument is, oh, it's been 10 years, or oh, it's in a different part of Thedas, it doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure whoever is sitting on the Ferelden throne or the Orlesian throne matters. Matters a lot more than what happened to the Inquisition. Because, spoilers, that decision doesn't fucking matter. The only decision that matters from the previous three games is, did you romance Solas or not? That is it. Now, before I get too deep into the actual game itself and like tear it apart or build it up, because there are a lot of things I like about this game, we need to talk about why this is the downfall of BioWare. One last thing I want to give Veilguard its flowers for before I go into its development history is I do think that the villains are actually pretty compelling in this game. Uh, Mostly Elgar'nan. Like, yes, is he a one-note tyrant? Yeah, but he's a very well done one-note tyrant. Is he more compelling than Loghain? Fuck no. Is he more compelling than Corypheus? Fuck yes. But that's not saying much. Gillenane about on par with Corypheus. She's kind of just there. And I actually think Solas as a villain was done okay. Not great, not what I wanted, not what he should have been, but okay. So Dragon Age the Veilguard's development is actually what caused the downfall of BioWare. We have discussed before a few of the problems BioWare had in the past, like Dragon Age 2's rush development, which still turned out a good game, but a game that was disappointing to a lot of people. But BioWare was able to fix that with the DLCs. And then Mass Effect 3, great game, terrible ending. Once again, BioWare was able to fix it. And even if people ran from BioWare after those games, Dragon Age Inquisition brought a lot of people back. It's a fantastic game. It's an amazing game. It is still the best-selling game in BioWare history. And I was hoping beyond hope, and I know a lot of other people were, that even though Andromeda was really disappointing, it was still an okay game, even though Anthem was dog shit. But the fourth Dragon Age game was going to be BioWare's return to form. It was going to come back, right? And a lot of people, me included, after that first playthrough, fooled ourselves into believing that BioWare was back. But in that second playthrough, noticed a lot more of the problems. That third playthrough is when I finally realized I like this game, but it might be the most disappointing game of all time for me. And it made Dragon Age no longer my favorite game series. But what happened, right? So originally, Dragon Age Veilguard was called Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and the codename in development was Dragon Age Joplin, Project Joplin. The Project Joplin, we got to see a glimpse at in the art books. Originally, a single-player RPG, like Veilguard ended up being, right? Seems on par with BioWare so far. And everything that was set up at the end of Trespasser was there. Legions of elves joining the Dreadwolf. It was going to be there. Something very absent from Veilguard. What else was absent from Veilguard? Solas as the main antagonist. Solas was planned as the main antagonist of Dreadwolf originally, for obvious reasons, ended up not being. Now, Elgar'nan and Gillenane are fine villains, but personally, I would have rather have saved them for the next game and let Solas have his time as the main villain, or make them DLC villains. I don't care. Now, Solas was going to have henchmen, a right-hand woman who was going to get in your way. Essentially, this character was going to be to Solas what Calpurnia or Samson were to Corypheus, what Cothrian was to Loghain, and weirdly, kind of what Cullen was to Meredith in a weird way. But that didn't happen. We didn't get that in Veilguard. We were going to get to see a lot more about what happened with the Titans and the Dwarves. We were going to see it in a better way than we did in Veilguard. We were going to have a different home base that was like a ship that traveled through Thetis underwater. It was going to be so cool. We were going to have different party members that were actually felt like better fits. Like, we were still going to have Davrin and Emmerich and Harding, but we were going to get better characters. Like, we were going to get one of the characters from Inquisition was the demon Imshale. The demon Imshale was going to be a party member in Veilguard. Calpurnia was originally planned on being a party member, and she ended up getting turned into Nev. Basically, everything that Joplin was setting up, Veilguard turned into something slightly worse, or much worse. So what happened to Joplin? What happened to Dreadwolf? A couple years into development, EA came to BioWare and said, hey, I know you've been making the next Dragon Age game as a single-player RPG. We're going to pivot. Make it a live service game. My least favorite words, by the way. I fucking hate live service games. Unless fighting games count. Do fighting games count? I don't think they count. If they count, they're the one exception. I fucking love fighting games, if anyone. Just really hoping Arc System Works never goes the way of BioWare. But back on track, they said that statement. They told BioWare, you don't have a choice. You're making this game a live service game. So they made it a live service game. So a lot of the gameplay elements we get and a lot of those like little story panels we get in between companion quests, that's left over from the live service elements. That's why the maps are built the way they are. That's everything that's built the way it is because it was a live service game. A lot of the weird, quippy dialogue that feels like it doesn't fit in Dragon Age, live service game, baby. And then a year and a half or maybe 2 years, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, before release, EA came back to BioWare and said, live service games are dying. Make it a single player RPG again. It changed a lot of the team. A lot of things in development went to hell. BioWare had to put out a game that was completely different from what they had been developing. The year and a half time span. It was Dragon Age 2 all over again, except this time they couldn't make it work as well as they did before. Now, a lot of this is due to the new developing team, and one of the biggest cardinal sins is the ending of the game was written towards the end of development by the Mass Effect team. The Mass Effect team was brought in to handle a lot of story rewrites for Dragon Age Veilguard. They were in meetings with the heads of BioWare that the Dragon Age writing team was not allowed in the room for. So the Dragon Age writing staff had to just sit there and watch the Mass Effect team write their game, change their story. Now, to be fair, a lot of the elements I talked about liking in Dragon Age Veilguard were the results of the Mass Effect team taking over writing. The final mission, that big battle in Tevinter, in Minrathous, Mass Effect team wrote that. That's why it feels like the suicide mission from Mass Effect 2. The Isle of the Gods, where you have to choose between Davern and Harding. Feels very Cade and Ashley, doesn't it? Feels very Vermeer. That was written by the Mass Effect team. Now, I don't know exactly how much of the game was rewritten by the Mass Effect team, but I do know all of that. Basically, everything from the Isle of Gods onwards was rewritten, which leads to some baffling inconsistencies in the story that I will get to if I ever make a video about this game by itself. And at this point, the entire BioWare writing team is no longer there. And this is where we get to where we are now. The entire Dragon Age writing team has been laid off. They no longer work at BioWare. I wish I could say they didn't deserve it. But they ruined everything I loved about Dragon Age with their writing choices in Veilguard. And the best writing choices in Veilguard, turns out, didn't even come from the Dragon Age writing team. Now, is it all their fault? No. It is equal parts the blame of EA and the Dragon Age writing team. We can't give the development team, like the people who actually made the game, like I actually made the gameplay, they did a great job. That game functions, it's fun to play. Gold stars to you guys. And that's why they're still at BioWare. Because every single review of the game has basically said the same thing. Gameplay is really fun. The world's fun to explore. It's a good game. The writing is mediocre. And with most RPG companies, mediocre writing wouldn't be a death sentence. But BioWare is held to a higher standard for a fucking reason. They were the kings of good writing. And if they had been allowed to make their original vision, Dragon Age the Dreadwolf, Dragon Age Project Joplin, I don't think I'd be making this video. I think if the Dragon Age writing team had been allowed to make just that game, it would have been fantastic. It would have been amazing. But we didn't get that game. Because we got Dragon Age Veilguard, and because the BioWare team, specifically the Dragon Age writing team, made the decisions they made with the lore of Dragon Age and the story of Dragon Age and the character choices, which I'll get into another day, they ruined it. They killed my favorite game franchise. I equal parts blame the Dragon Age writing staff and EA for the fact that BioWare is a shell of what it used to be. BioWare has fallen. And despite the fact that we're getting a new Mass Effect game in the next few years, I don't think BioWare will ever rise again. I hope I'm wrong. I hope to the gods that I am wrong and that the next Mass Effect game is so good. I'm hoping it's so good that it brings back Dragon Age 2. But I think that is a fool's hope. As of this moment, Dragon Age has fallen, and I think it's gone forever. BioWare has fallen from grace, and I don't think we're going to see it rise again. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, share it around with your friends, become a member if you feel so inclined. It really helps me out, lets me get videos like this one out faster. Anyways, this was a depressing video to make, but it needed to be made. I'll see y'all on the next one.